It is the autumn of 1944, and somewhere in the dense hedgerow country of northern France, a 22-year-old from rural Georgia is about to save his squad's life. The German machine gun nest has pinned them flat in a ditch for 11 minutes. 3 men are already wounded. The platoon commander is dead. And this young man, a private first class whose name appears in no history book, rises from the mud, braces his feet against the wet earth, and opens fire with a weapon that weighs nearly 9 kilograms and sounds, to anyone within 100 meters, like the tearing of industrial canvas. The Browning Automatic Rifle. The bar fires 20 rounds in under 4 seconds. The German position falls silent. This scene, or something very close to it, repeated itself in hedgerows and rice paddies, and frozen Korean hillsides, and jungle clearings across 3 decades of American warfare. The M1918 Browning Automatic Rifle was not the most sophisticated weapon of the Second World War. It was not the lightest, or the most modern, or the most technically elegant. What it was, without serious argument, was one of the most consequential automatic weapons ever placed in the hands of an ordinary infantry soldier, a weapon that fundamentally changed how American rifle squads fought, moved, and survived. And then the war ended. And then another war ended. And then, with a casualness that still astonishes military historians, Montgomery Ward began selling them for $11.95. This is how that happened, and this is what the law of 1968 did to stop it. To understand why the bar existed at all, one must return to the catastrophe of the Western Front in 1917, when the United States Army entered the First World War and sent its soldiers into the trenches of France. It confronted a tactical reality that its pre-war doctrine had entirely failed to anticipate. The problem was not courage. American soldiers had courage in abundance. The problem was firepower. Specifically, the complete absence of any weapon that could provide automatic fire support at the squad level during an infantry assault. The standard American infantry rifle was the Springfield M1903, a fine bolt-action weapon accurate to considerable distances, but requiring a deliberate manual action between each shot. In the grinding close-quarters combat of trench warfare, where victory or defeat could hinge on the volume of fire a small unit could produce in a matter of seconds, the bolt-action rifle was fundamentally inadequate. The Germans had recognized this years earlier, equipping their assault formations with light machine guns and grenade launchers that gave individual squads genuine suppressive capability. The British had the Lewis gun, the French had the Chauchat, a weapon so mechanically unreliable that American soldiers who received it through Allied supply channels frequently threw it away in preference for nothing at all. What America needed was a weapon that one man could carry, that fired automatically from a detachable magazine, and that could lay down sufficient fire to suppress an enemy position long enough for the rest of the squad to advance. It needed, in the language of modern military doctrine, an automatic rifle, and it needed one immediately. The request went to a designer whose name was already synonymous with American firearms innovation. John Moses Browning, working at his facility in Ogden, Utah, had been refining automatic weapon designs for over a decade. The challenge he faced was specific and demanding. Create a weapon light enough to be carried and fired on the move, what the Army called walking fire, whilst delivering the sustained automatic capability of a crew-served machine gun. The result, demonstrated to American military officials in February 1917, left the observers speechless. The M1918 Browning Automatic Rifle that emerged from John Browning's Ogden workshop was a gas-operated, air-cooled automatic rifle chambered for the standard .30-06 Springfield cartridge, the same round used in the M1903 rifle, which simplified the Army's ammunition supply enormously. The operating mechanism used a portion of propellant gas tapped from the barrel to drive a piston rearward, cycling the bolt and chambering the next round with no manual intervention required. It was, in engineering terms, a straightforward long-stroke gas piston system. But in 1917, its reliability and power were genuinely remarkable. The weapon measured 121 centimeters from muzzle to butt, slightly longer than a standard rifle, and weighed 7.25 kilograms unloaded, rising to approximately 9 kilograms with a full 20-round magazine of .30-06 ammunition. That weight was considerable for a weapon meant to be fired on the move, and it shaped the entire tactical doctrine that grew around the bar over the following 3 decades. A soldier carrying a bar was carrying the equivalent of a large car battery slung from a shoulder strap, to be raised and fired in short, controlled bursts whilst advancing across open ground. Production of the M1918 was divided amongst three primary contractors: Winchester Repeating Arms in New Haven, Connecticut, Marlin Rockwell Corporation in New Haven, and Colt's Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company in Hartford, Connecticut. Winchester alone produced approximately 47,000 M1918s before the armistice of November 1918, a figure that represented an extraordinary industrial achievement given that production had begun only months earlier. The improved M1918I A2 variant, introduced in the late 1930s and refined through the Second World War, added a bipod, a flash hider, and selectable rates of fire. Slow automatic at approximately 300 rounds per minute, or fast automatic at approximately 650 rounds per minute. By the time American industry reached its full wartime production capacity in 1943 and 1944, BAR production had spread to additional facilities, including the International Business Machines Corporation, IBM, in Poughkeepsie, New York, and the New England Small Arms Corporation in Chicopee Falls, Massachusetts. Total production figures across all variants and manufacturers reached an estimated 188,380 M1918A2s during the Second World War alone, with overall production across both World Wars and the interwar period reaching figures that historians estimate at between 350,000 and 400,000. The 4 million figure referenced in popular accounts of the post-war surplus trade reflects the total number of bars manufactured across all variants and all production runs from 1917 through the Korean War period. A number that, it should be noted, includes weapons produced for export and for Allied nations, and for which complete records do not always survive. In combat, the bar occupied a unique tactical position that no other Allied weapon quite replicated. Each American rifle squad of 11 men was built around a single bar team, the gunner and his assistant, whose weapon provided the squad's primary automatic fire capability. The barman was simultaneously the most valuable and the most vulnerable member of his squad. German tactical doctrine specifically instructed soldiers to identify and eliminate bar gunners first, recognizing that neutralizing the automatic weapon would degrade the entire squad's fighting effectiveness. On the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944, bar gunners of the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions provided whatever covering fire was possible in the catastrophic opening minutes of the assault on Omaha Beach, firing from the surf and from behind the bodies of fallen comrades at German positions in the bluffs above. Veterans' accounts describe the BAR's distinctive sound, a deep, measured hammering quite unlike the higher-pitched crack of the Garand or the rapid stutter of a Thompson, as both reassuring and terrifying in equal measure, depending entirely on which side of it one stood. In the Pacific, the weapon proved devastatingly effective in the close quarters fighting of Island Clearance, where its .30-06 round could penetrate the timber and coral construction of Japanese bunkers at ranges where lighter weapons failed. On Peleliu, on Iwo Jima, on Okinawa, BAR teams led the grinding advance through fortified positions that consumed men and ammunition at rates that appalled even experienced commanders. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. The German Army's equivalent to the bar concept was the MG-42 General Purpose Machine Gun, though the comparison reveals more differences than similarities. The MG-42 was a crew-served weapon designed to be fired from a bipod or tripod, with a cyclic rate of approximately 1,200 rounds per minute that produced its distinctive buzzing sound, so fast that individual shots were indistinguishable to the human ear. It was heavier than the bar at approximately 11.5 kilograms, required a two-man crew to operate effectively, and consumed ammunition at a rate that strained German supply lines. Where the bar equipped every rifle squad with organic automatic fire capability, the MG-42 was a more specialised weapon requiring dedicated crew and resupply infrastructure. The British Bren gun represented perhaps the closest philosophical parallel to the bar, a squad-level light machine gun firing the .303 British cartridge from a distinctive top-mounted 30-round curved magazine. The Bren weighed approximately 10.3 kilograms loaded, slightly heavier than the bar, and fired at a more conservative 500 rounds per minute. Its accuracy at range was exceptional, arguably superior to the bar in the sustained fire role, but its top-mounted magazine limited the firer's ability to use low cover effectively. Approximately 30,000 Bren guns were in British service by the end of 1940, with production eventually reaching over 250,000 units across Canadian and British factories. The Soviet Degtyaryov DP-28 light machine gun, with its distinctive 47-round Pan magazine, served a similar squad support role in Red Army formations, though its Pan magazine was both bulkier and more fragile than the BAR's box magazine in field conditions. None of these weapons quite replicated the BAR's combination of portability, firepower, and mechanical simplicity, a combination that kept it in active American service from the Meuse-Argonne offensive of 1918 to the rice paddies of Korea in 1953. The Korean War consumed significant quantities of bar ammunition and wore out many weapons that had already survived the Second World War, but it also demonstrated that the bar's fundamental design, conceived in 1917, remained tactically viable against a modern enemy in 1950. This was both a tribute to John Browning's engineering and an indictment of American procurement policy, which had repeatedly deferred the bar's replacement in favour of other priorities. By the late 1950s, with the bar finally being phased out of frontline American service in favour of the M1918 Automatic Rifle and the Browning M1919 machine gun in squad support roles, the Army faced the familiar post-war arithmetic of surplus. Hundreds of thousands of BARs entered long-term storage at arsenals from Rock Island in Illinois to Anniston in Alabama. Others were transferred to Reserve and National Guard units, to Allied nations under military assistance programs, and, through the mechanisms that had made hardware store carbines and department store Thompson guns a feature of post-war American retail, to the civilian market. Montgomery Ward, the great Chicago-based mail-order and retail empire that had been selling Americans everything from farm machinery to wedding rings since 1872, became one of the most prominent retail outlets for surplus bars in the late 1950s and early 1960s. The $11.95 price point, roughly equivalent to $125 today, placed a weapon that had cost the government several $100s to manufacture within reach of virtually any working American family. The bar hung in Montgomery Ward catalogues between garden tools and children's bicycles, offered with the same matter-of-fact practicality as any other piece of durable goods. The Gun Control Act of 1968 ended this commerce with the finality of a door closing. The Act's provisions, prohibiting mail-order firearms sales, imposing new dealer licensing requirements, banning the importation of surplus military weapons lacking sporting purpose, dismantled in a single legislative stroke the entire infrastructure through which weapons like the BAR had reached civilian hands. The Montgomery Ward catalogue page that had listed the bar for $11.95 disappeared. The glass counter display came down. The pipeline from government arsenal to retail shelf closed permanently. What the Act could not do, and did not attempt to do, was reach back into the homes and gun cabinets and farm buildings where hundreds of thousands of BARs already sat in civilian ownership. These weapons remained legal. They remain legal today, provided they were registered under the National Firearms Act before the May 1986 deadline imposed by the Firearm Owners Protection Act, which closed the registry to new transferable machine gun registrations entirely. A transferable registered M1918A2 bar on today's collector market commands prices between $25,000 and $40,000, a figure that transforms the $11.95 Montgomery Ward purchase into one of the most inadvertently profitable retail transactions in American history. The weapon that a working man bought from a catalogue for the price of a modest night out now represents a significant investment portfolio entry. Return, then, to that young man from Georgia, rising from the mud of a Norman ditch with 9 kilograms of John Browning's engineering braced against his hip. He does not know that the weapon in his hands will one day hang in a department store. He does not know that the government which issued it to him will one day sell it for $12. He does not know that a law will one day make even that modest commerce impossible, and that the passage of decades will transform his battlefield tool into a collector's treasure worth more than a family car. He knows only that 20 rounds of .30-06 at 600 rounds per minute is sufficient to silence a German machine gun nest. He knows that his squad is still alive. He knows that the bar worked. 4 million of them were made. They crossed oceans and fought in 3 wars, and hung in department store catalogues, and sat in gun cabinets, and eventually, for the ones that survived and were registered in time, became worth a small fortune. John Browning designed the bar in 1917 to be carried into battle by one man. He could not have imagined what that one weapon would eventually become. But then he rarely needed to imagine. He simply built things that worked, and this one worked for a very long time indeed.